Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Laura Prada from our Telesur studios in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with our news. You stay with us. We begin in Venezuela. President Nicolas Maduro thanked China for its constant support and cooperation, which is helped by a permanent air route that exists between both nations.
We have welcomed 3 planes from China with humanitarian aid as part of our cooperation agreements. China is helping more than 120 countries in the world with medical supplies and assistance. The first country of Latin America and the Caribbean to receive medical experts and scientists from China was Venezuela. They are welcomed by the warmth of the Venezuelan people, and they have given us scientific experience and knowledge, their smiles, love and solidarity. I want to thank the President of the People's Republic of China, Xi Jinping, our partner, for all the support he has given to our nation, to our people.
Meanwhile, the Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez thanked the aid for the battle of the spread of the COVID-19, which was received from Russia, United Nations system to fight the COVID-19.
Quería, en nombre del presidente Nicolas Maduro,
I wanted, on behalf of the President Nicolas Maduro, to express our deep thanks to the United Nations system, to its Secretary General, to the Director of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros Adhanom. I want to thank the coordinator of the United Nations system in Venezuela, Peter Grossman. I also want to thank the Russian Federation, its ambassador in Venezuela, our friend Sergio, as we call him, Sergey. Welcome. As soon as he arrived in Venezuela, he became very active in our bilateral relations, in our bilateral cooperation. Today we have received 20,000 kits of PCR tests from the Russian Federation. As you will know, one of the highlights in this fight against the pandemic, in addition to the collective and social quarantine that is being complied with in Venezuela, is also the process of mass screening through PCR and rapid tests.
And a group of Chinese specialists arrived in Nigeria on Wednesday to support the African country in the battle against the novel coronavirus. High officials received a team composed of 15 specialists who arrived in Abuja airport along with medical supplies. Nigerian authorities emphasized that the Chinese team will help advise and support local experts on the management of the pandemic. As of Wednesday, Nigeria reports 276 confirmed cases and 6 deaths. The Chinese government has sent health professionals and medical equipment across the world in solidarity with all people. And authorities in Benin are enforcing the mandatory use of face masks as a preventative action against COVID-19. The measure was implemented to halt the spread of the virus as police in Benin monitor the compliance of this, but citizens have complained they cannot find or afford the mask. As of Wednesday, the country's reported 26 cases, 1 death and 5 recovered patients.
A mask can be worn 2 days in a row. You wear it today, it's sure that tomorrow you have to change. So you need to have money so you can buy one today and tomorrow at 200 CFA francs per unit. In 1 week you could spend 1,500 or 2,000 CFA francs. So it's really difficult and we have to go and get it from the street vendors.
To our information, every pharmacy must have 1,000 face masks. The first time we had 300 and all of it sold out in under 3 hours. Yesterday we had 700 and that sold out in under 4 hours. There is a high demand but we are still waiting.
And Liberia has declared a state of emergency and denounced a lockdown in the capital Monrovia. Movement between the countries, 15 counties, will be also banned from Friday night, and all non-essential businesses and government offices will be closed.
Throughout this period, residents may leave home only for essential journeys, for reasons of health and food. We should be restricted to your local community only and be limited to a single person per household for a maximum of 1 hour.
And Saudi Arabia announced a ceasefire in Yemen starting Thursday. The UN called for a halt in hostilities amid concerns of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Saudi-led coalition fighting the Houthi rebels in Yemen announced on Wednesday that its forces would begin a ceasefire starting Thursday, a step that could pave the way for the first direct peace talks between the two sides and that have been at war for more than 5 years. The ceasefire will last 2 weeks, and that it comes in response to UN calls to halt hostilities amid the coronavirus pandemic. The ceasefire could be extended to pave the way for all the parties to discuss proposals, steps and mechanisms for sustainable ceasefire in Yemen. Afghanistan has released 100 Taliban prisoners, claiming they were among 5,000 detainees to be freed under a deal between the group and the United States. However, the Taliban said they have yet to verify those released were on the list they handed over to the Trump administration during the talks. Taliban withdrew a technical team to oversee the releases because of delay by the government. The U.S. Taliban deal signed in February also calls for the Taliban to free 1,000 government personnel they hold hostage. Time for a first break. Remember, follow us on Twitter at Telesur English and on my account at Laura P. Telesur. We'll be right back. We are back with our news. In Brazil, a field hospital for people infected with COVID-19 is being built to assist those most needed due to President Jair Bolsonaro's mismanagement of the crisis. According to the health ministry, Brazil still does not have enough ventilators, intensive care beds, qualified personnel, and diagnostic tests to deal with the most keen phase of the coronavirus pandemic. Health authorities began to sound the alarm this week over supply shortages as hospitals face growing numbers of patients with COVID-19. Confirmed cases of the coronavirus in the country soared to 15,927 on Wednesday, with the death toll rising by 133 in just 24 hours to 800, the ministry said. In El Salvador, the Red Cross has donated about 8,000 gallons of water in an effort to assist in the fight against the novel coronavirus. 2 trucks delivered the water in Los Almendros in Delgado municipality to help the inhabitants of the community. This was coordinated by local leaders who called on all competent authorities to take action for the distribution of water at a national level. People were grateful for help they received from Red Cross, as health authorities urged them to take preventative measures against COVID-19, stressing hand washing.
The Red Cross as an institution of humanitarian aid, in one of its main lines of work is the delivery of water and promoting hygiene. As it is very important that we bring water to the communities of El Salvador, we have delivered water to a total of 22 communities to date, 68,000 gallons of water. Why? Because it is important in preventing the transmission of COVID-19. Washing hands properly is very important to prevent the spread.
And the Paraguayan government has announced an extension of the national-wide lockdown for another week. This will be the third extension of the lockdown since the first confirmed case was reported on March 7th. On March 20th, the country imposed a quarantine that was supposed to last until April 12th, as positive cases of COVID-19 have risen from 11 to 119.
We will extend it for 1 more week for sure. Everyone is preparing for war. I have already said we must prepare for the worst, but the best will come.
Authorities in Chile have ordered the mandatory use of face masks for all citizens as coronavirus cases have surpassed 5,000. The use of gloves is also now mandatory for people in public spaces. However, citizens have condemned the government for the delay of preventative measures as the first COVID-19 case was recorded on March 3rd.
It finally occurred to Piñera's government to put on masks, but this should have been done from the beginning so that we will not get infected.
Jamaica's Prime Minister Andrew Holness has announced that the government will be extending the nightly curfew implemented to fight COVID-19 on the island. The measure started on April 1st and was extended to end of April 8th. It prevented the movement of non-essential persons between the hours of 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. The Prime Minister also said that other restrictions currently in place to address the pandemic, including working from home and the closure of all borders, will also be extended. Jamaica has 63 confirmed cases and 3 deaths related to the virus. And Trinidad and Tobago has recorded 107 COVID-19 cases and 8 deaths as the government continues to ramp up efforts to fight the coronavirus. The health minister warned citizens that the pathogen is evolving and asked the public to stay at home.
Anybody who is outside of their homes, not on essential business, you are the pinnacle of a pyramid of infection. You will infect 2 people, then 2 will infect 6, then 6 will infect 10, and then all those 10 persons start up their own pyramid, and you get this explosion in cases. And that is what we are trying to avoid with these stay-home orders.
And Peru has extended its quarantine measures, including home confinement, night curfew, and border closures until April 26 to fight COVID-19 pandemic.
We don't want there to be a risk that the great effort to end the state of emergency early than what professionals and experts actually recommend will end up reversing this situation.
In Bolivia, the de facto government has appointed pulmonologist Marcelo Navajas as the new Minister of Health after the resignation of Aníbal Cruz. Cruz resigned on Wednesday after facing criticism over his handling of COVID-19 pandemic. Bolivia's mortality rate as a result of the virus ranked above the global average of 4.7%, standing at a 6.5% so far. 210 people have tested positive for the illness, with 15 deaths and 2 recovered. And a ship of medical aid from China arrived to Mexico City as part of the government's plan to bring in personal protection equipment from hospitals in Mexico. According to the Deputy Health Secretary Hugo Lopez, the shipment mostly includes hazmat suits, surgical masks, and N95 masks. He also said Mexico is expecting more of this kind of shipments from China.
Al gobierno de China.
Equipment and medical supplies are coming in from China. We are very grateful to the government of China because they have facilitated the process to acquire equipment that we did not have.
No se tenía.
Time for a short break. You stay tuned with us. Back with our news. In the United States, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says the state saw its highest single-day coronavirus death toll of 779 people. He ordered all flags in New York to be flown at half-mast.
But there's no doubt that we are now bending the curve, and there's no doubt that we can't stop doing what we're doing. That's the good news. The bad news isn't just bad. The bad news is actually terrible. Highest single-day death toll yet, 779 people.
And meanwhile, the United States faces the threat of COVID-19. U.S. Senator for Vermont Bernie Sanders has suspended his presidential campaign, making Joe Biden the main front-runner to challenge Donald Trump for the past in November. Sanders broke the news to his staff on Wednesday. The announcement follows today's primary held in Wisconsin amid stay-at-home orders to curb the spread of the novel coronavirus. The results have not yet been announced.
I wish I could give you better news, but I think you know the truth. And that is that we are now some 300 delegates behind Vice President Biden, and the path toward victory is virtually impossible. So while we are winning the ideological battle, and while we are winning the support of so many young people and working people throughout the country, I have concluded that this battle for the Democratic nomination will not be successful. And so today, I am announcing the suspension of my campaign. Please know that I do not make this decision lightly. In fact, it has been a very difficult and painful decision. Over the past few weeks, Jane and I, in consultation with top staff and many of our prominent supporters, have made an honest assessment of the prospects for victory. If I believed we had a feasible path to the nomination, I would certainly continue the campaign. But it's just not there. I know that there may be some in our movement who disagree with this decision, who would like us to fight on to the last ballot cast at the Democratic Convention. I understand that position. But as I see the crisis gripping the nation, exacerbated by a president unwilling or unable to provide any kind of credible leadership, and the work that needs to be done to protect people in this most desperate hour, I cannot, in good conscience, continue to mount a campaign that cannot win and which would interfere with the important work required of all of us in this difficult hour.
To have more details about this, we have our correspondent Jorge Gestoso on the following report. Welcome.
Thank you. Bernie Sanders announced that he's suspending his campaign. He said that he was making calculations and he's running behind 300 delegates from Joe Biden, and mathematically it's impossible for him to be able to win the nomination, and therefore he said that he's suspending, and he's using the word suspending that is different from dropping out, because he said that he is going to continue to appear in the ballots of all the primaries from here to the end of the process, and that is going to letting him continue to gain delegates, and therefore he said, I want to reach the convention. Initially there was in July and now has been postponed to August, even if it's a virtual convention, with the most possible delegates in order to influence the platform of the party when we reach the end of that convention. And that platform, he wants to include what has been the basics of his campaign, that we're talking about universal health care. He said precisely, this pandemic has shown the big failure of the system that we have actually, he said, because actually we are having about tens of millions of Americans unemployed, and their health care was absolutely tied to the employment. So now they found that are not only unemployed but also uninsured. And he says that shows that it's absolutely necessary for the country to have a universal health care. He also mentions the rights that he believes that has to be with the people. He says that, of course, healthcare is a right and not a privilege, that the Americans should have the right to have access to university with no payments, with no economic failures, also the respect for the planet with the climate change. And also he said that he is leading a movement, not a political platform, but a movement that is multi-generational, multiracial, and he wants to continue that movement and bring it on. So he said, I'm suspending my campaign, but I'm pushing for this movement to continue to go on and to reach then the Democratic Convention with the most strength, with the more delegates, and with the more people behind the movement. He praised Joe Biden. He said that he's going to be behind Joe Biden because he said that the most important purpose of this campaign is to beat what he called the most dangerous president in the history of the United States. That's how he defined Donald Trump. We get back to you now.
Thank you, Jorge. That was Jorge Gestoso from Washington. And we move on. 16 hours long talks on a coronavirus economic rescue plan for the Eurozone worth up to $583 billion that have broken up without a deal. Negotiations were suspended between 19 finance ministers of the Eurozone amid divisions over the conditions that should be attached to credit issued by the European Stability Mechanism. Countries hardest hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, such as Italy and Spain, can draw on emergency credit lines and request about $259 billion in loans. Talks are expected to continue this Thursday. Italy, the country with the highest coronavirus death toll in the world, has recorded 552 new fatalities in 24 hours. The European nation has over 92,000 confirmed COVID-19 cases.
The total of people positive with COVID-19 is 95,262, with an increase of 1,095 patients testing positive since yesterday. The total deaths today is 552. The total number of recoveries has risen to 26,491, and we have 2,099 recorded recoveries since yesterday.
In Belarus, the president continues to dismiss calls for a curfew amid COVID-19 pandemic. This as the country recorded 205 new infections for a total of 1,066 cases and 13 deaths.
We can see that all around us they keep spouting quarantine, curfew. It would be a piece of cake. We could do it within 24 hours, but what will we eat? It's no longer only a few officials from international organizations who are talking about famine in the near future, but everyone else is talking about it too, including yesterday's most developed, most advanced countries and their leaders.
And Russia has announced measures to help businesses and people cope with the economic impact of the coronavirus crisis. This includes unemployment benefits unequal to the amount of the minimum wage and allowing small and medium businesses to reschedule their debts.
Everyone who lost their job and applied to the employment service after March 1st. I propose paying unemployment benefits in April, May and June automatically and the highest bracket, which we have already increased, equivalent to the minimum wage of 12,130 rubles.
Like this, we come to the end of this news brief. You can visit and find this and much more other information on our website, TelesurEnglish.net, where you can find this and much more other information. The invitation is made for you. You continue with us with Telesur, always together, connecting our global thousands. Until next time, thank you for watching.